We've been down to the very basis of all the things that make up every single network that you'll ever see with the OSI model. Now let's come back out, and let's come back out to the level of cloud. And we want to talk about the cloud for a few minutes. We want to talk about the fact that it really is part of this one really big network. Remember, it's all one big network. Just so that we can lay a foundation here. So what is the cloud? You know, how did the cloud get a name like cloud? And so I did a search of Google Images for wide area network diagram, and this is what came up. And so if you look at each one of these wide area network diagrams, what you'll see is a bunch of little icons, and in every single one of them, there's a little cloud. See it? There's a cloud, a cloud, a cloud, a cloud, a cloud. Almost all of them have a cloud involved. Now, here's what that means. Is that network engineers who are designing wide area networks and creating these diagrams, they have a series of little icons. And they have an icon that represents everything that's inside of their building in the network. They have an icon for telephones and computers and servers and cameras and icons for routers and switches and stuff. And so each one of those has an icon, and they put those icons in place and put lines between them to connect them all together to represent their local area network. But ultimately, they're going to connect this network to something else, someplace far away, and they'll just draw a little cloud there and draw a line to the cloud. And what the cloud is representative of is computing resources, just like the ones that are in the building, but computing resources that are someplace else. That's all. That cloud represents IT resources that are not here, they're someplace else. And so that's really what we get from this, is that that's what cloud computing is. It's IT resources that are not here, they're someplace else. So here's a definition for us. Cloud computing, it's a model, and you're going to want to underline some words here in your handout. Cloud computing is a model for enabling remote network access, underline remote. It's remote, remember these are IT resources that are someplace else, right? And so it enables remote network access to a shared pool of computing resources. Shared is the other word you should underline. They're shared by multiple people. They're a pool. So here's a definition for us. Cloud computing, it's a model, and you're going to want to underline some words here in your handout. Cloud computing is a model for enabling remote network access, underline remote. It's remote, remember these are IT resources that are someplace else, right? And so it enables remote network access to a shared pool of computing resources. Shared is the other word you should underline. They're shared by multiple people. They're a pool of, you put a lot of different computing resources in one place, that's why they're pooled together. And it's things like servers and storage and applications and services. IT kinds of things, right? Things that IT departments need, they're just remote and they're shared. And that's what makes them cloud. Now, when you talk about cloud computing, you really have to understand the perspective from the speaker. Now, if you're like the example on the left here, then maybe it's kind of like a company. We have, you have the home office and remote office, and you have a warehouse, and you have these remote facilities, and you would discuss the cloud as if it's over there. It's someplace else. But if you want the people who are sort of inside the cloud providers, people like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and such, if you allow them to talk about the cloud, then they're going to talk about it from a different perspective, from the sort of the inside out. And so if you're reading an article about cloud computing, you just need to ask yourself, who's writing the article? And from what perspective do they see the cloud? That's important to understand some of the terminologies that we're going to learn here in a few minutes. Now, we're going to see in our discussion here 3 service models. We'll talk about 4 deployment models, and we'll talk about 5 essential attributes, the things that make the cloud what it is. First of all, this hosting landscape. We kind of need to get a picture, a map, if you will, of this IT landscape. And so you always start this discussion with on-premises, the traditional IT department. You know every reasonable sized company on the planet has a room back in the back someplace. It's closed up and it's dark, and that's where all the IT stuff lives, all the computers and servers and all the stuff that lives back there. You've probably seen it. It's probably a bit of a mess. But that's the traditional IT department, and it's referred to now as being on-premises. Now, remember who's referring to it. It's the cloud guys. And so the cloud guys call that traditional IT department on-premises. It's on the premises of the IT consumer. A little short version, on-prem. You may hear it referred to as just on-prem. That's the traditional IT department. Now, as things move along, we came across another kind of IT resource called a co-location. It's a business, it's a building that's someplace else. It's not on-prem here, it's someplace else, that allows me to now put my IT resources there instead of on-premises. Instead of on-prem, it's colo. Okay? Now, a good example of that is if you were concerned about your IT resources maybe being involved in a flood or a hurricane or a power outage or something like that, and then your whole business, all of your remote offices go down as well. And so what you might do there is contract with a co-location facility, which is probably close, but not too close, and you move your IT resources there. If not all of them, some of them. But so that the point there is, it gives you some disaster recovery. It gives you the ability now to recover from a disaster because the disaster is not likely to hit both facilities at the same time. If you had a power outage or a storm or something like that, it gives you the opportunity to keep your enterprise up and running. Now, these businesses, these co-location businesses, sell their product, which is space in their building. They sell their product from a retail perspective and a wholesale perspective. They sell retail to the company who will buy the space from them directly, the end user company. The end user company moves all their equipment there. They build a cage around it, put a big lock on it, on the cage, and then the end user is the only one with the key. That's a co-location retail facility. Now, these colos also sell wholesale, which means that a reseller, an IT system integrator, reseller, solution provider, now they're ready to install or build a data center for an end user customer, but instead of building it on-prem, they'll build it in the colo. And so the reseller buys the co-location space and resells it to the end user as part of his IT solution. Now that's a colo facility. We've learned some things about that. Now let's move on to hosting. And so hosting, the hosting facility itself, if you wanted to buy hosted services from a hosting company, from a cloud services provider, then you're going to have to learn to really answer three questions. And the first question is, the hosting company will ask you, do you want your IT resources managed or unmanaged? Okay, well, you think, well, heck, I don't want my IT resource to be unmanaged. What does that mean? Well, you have to think from their perspective. What the question they're asking you is, do you want your IT resources managed by us or unmanaged by us, right? It's kind of a selfish perspective. But that's the question you have to learn to ask and answer. Do I want it managed and unmanaged? Of course, one is going to cost less than the other. It's going to cost more to have it managed by the hosting company and less if I manage it myself. That's the first question, managed, unmanaged. Second question is standard, custom. So the IT hosting company may say, okay, do you want standard or custom? Well, what is standard? Well, here are 5 servers. Here's the biggest one, here's the smallest one. Pick one. They're all Dell. Okay, well, I'm not really sort of a Dell guy. I was hoping maybe for HP. Well, okay, you want custom then. Custom is, okay, here's 5 HPs and 5 Dells and 5 IBMs. Pick one, right? And instead of being able just to choose the actual server you want, then standard means I'm choosing from a very small list. Custom's probably going to mean I'm going to choose just from a little bit of a larger list. That's all. And so a standard solution is going to cost less than custom. And the reason is that probably 100% of the technicians who work at this hosting facility are trained on those 5 Dell servers, whereas maybe only 25% of them are trained on all 15. And so it's going to cost a little more for custom. You can never, there were companies to start out, cloud companies, who would say, look, you choose any old server you want and we'll put it in for you. Those companies went out of business because they just couldn't. That's not a sustainable model. And so today, you have to learn what this terminology about standard versus custom. Here's another choice, dedicated. That means exactly what it sounds like. Do you want these resources that we're going to give you usage of, do you want them dedicated to you? You're the only one who uses them. Or can they be shared by others? Now you're thinking, how can I share IT resources with another company? There might be a competitor. Well, you'll see that it's pretty straightforward. And so the choice you have to decide is dedicated versus shared. Shared is going to cost less because the cloud company is actually now providing usage of a single server to multiple companies. They sell it multiple times. And so dedicated versus shared. And you'll see here that arrow the hosting companies kind of want to drive you to the right of this sort of quadrant. They want to sell you shared, managed, standard solutions because that's where they make the most money. And you don't blame them. Whereas other companies may want to choose something, but the transition and the trend here is to try to move you away from dedicated and toward shared. Now, in reality, most companies wind up with some sort of a hybrid solution, some combination of things. And if you were going to buy a hosted solution in your really business critical applications like ERP or CRM, if you're going to have those hosted, then they might be dedicated servers, maybe a custom server, maybe a product you're going to manage yourself. And they may be in the upper left-hand quadrant of that picture. Whereas you may have your websites, 5 or 6 websites, and you just hand all the websites off to them and say, look, put these in your shared, managed, solution, and you guys take care of those, keep them up and running, do some load balancing, do the things that need to be done. And so that gives you then a hybrid solution. And so if you just from the perspective of the hosting company, that's how they would see a hybrid solution. Very, very common, the most common kind of an approach to a hosting company. That's if you ask the hosting company what is hybrid. But if you were to ask most any IT manager on the planet what is hybrid, that's what their hybrid solution is actually going to look like. Because I'm going to tell you, there will always be equipment on-prem. And there might also be equipment colo, and also equipment being hosted. And so a hybrid solution probably will always look more like that wider ellipse. I say to the hosting company, look, I thought you guys were a cloud provider, show me the cloud, sell me some cloud. And so if you ask the hosting company about the cloud, that's how they define the cloud. They define it safely down in that right lower-hand quadrant. To them, cloud is managed by them, it's standard hardware, it's shared by lots of customers, that's cloud. But again, go back to that IT manager and say, what is your perspective of cloud? His drawing cloud is going to look like this. He's going to say, yeah, that hosting company, those are cloud resources. And my co-location relationship, that's a cloud resource. But also, I have some cloud computing right on premises. You may think, now, wait a minute, I thought that the definition of cloud was it was someplace else. I'm going to introduce you in a few minutes to some technology that will show you how you can actually have a cloud resource right on your premises. All right, ready for these 3 service models. Now, these are probably things you've seen, read about before, these little as-a-service kinds of things. And there are lots and lots of as-a-service models that we're starting to see get developed. But these are the 3 basic as-a-service kinds of models. First is infrastructure as a service. Now, the infrastructure, IT infrastructure, just by definition, are things like servers and storage devices, and the networks that connect them all together, all the things that make up an IT department can be provided, that infrastructure can be provided by a hosting company as a service. In other words, instead of buying all of that stuff, they're going to allow you to use it for a monthly fee. Now, that infrastructure is going to come along as a service, but when you buy infrastructure as a service, you also get along with that the air conditioning that it takes to make that system work. Think about it. And so if I take a server out of my IT room and get rid of it, and now I'm buying that same server as a service from the cloud, then I no longer have to provide cooling for that thing. I no longer have to provide power or service for that server that's no longer in my building. Someone else is responsible for that. And so that's what hosting companies do. They provide the cooling for the server, they provide the power for the server, they provide physical and data security. Physical security means that the physical building, absolutely the most secure place you've ever seen. And so you'd think that there's rocket science going on in there. Lots of different layers of security because they just don't want anybody walking in there. Physical security. Also data security. We hear a lot about data breaches and people hacking into people's network and stealing a bunch of credit card numbers. That's dramatically common these days. But the fact is that these data centers are the most secure places on the planet. They have the highest levels of data security. It would be extremely difficult to breach. They give you great network access. So these hosting facilities have big pipes to the outside world and lots of connectivity. And so when you buy infrastructure as a service, don't think I'm just getting to use someone's server. There's a whole lot of other things that go along with that. You'll hear them sometimes call it ping, power, and pipe. That's infrastructure as a service. In the lower right, you'll see that's pretty much the domain of network engineers. Network engineers are going to be ones talking about acquiring infrastructure as a service. Next comes platform as a service, and it sits right on top of infrastructure. If you were developing an application, a big application for your business to run, and it's going to be delivered as a cloud service, you're going to want to go ahead and get with your infrastructure all of the platform-related things that are necessary to develop and run the application. Things like operating systems and middleware and web services, database services, a lot of different things that are necessary to actually make an application work. And so you can purchase that as a service from the same cloud provider. And for instance, if you were building an application that was more CRM oriented, building a CRM application around Salesforce.com, you might use Salesforce's platform as a service. Or if you're building an application that was sort of maps oriented or location based, Google would have a platform that might make sense because they're big in maps. And there are others. So Microsoft is called Azure, and there's a whole group, an open source group called OpenStack. And so that's the platform as a service that you can buy as a service along with your infrastructure. Now, once the application's built, it's delivered SaaS, or software as a service. And software as a service is just standard applications that are running remotely. You're probably accessing them through a browser, and it's common things like Gmail and Google Apps and Microsoft Office 365. There are a lot of different examples here of just software as a service. Salesforce.com's been around a dozen or more years, and so it's really not a brand new kind of thing. So those are the three service models for cloud services. Next is deployment models. Now, so what I've done is I've put our little diagram in the bottom right-hand corner there so that you can see, as we talk about these deployment models, you can sort of see where they live in that hosting landscape. And so first we'll talk about private cloud. Private cloud is cloud resources that are on premises or co-located, okay? And you'll see the little circle that I put down there on the diagram. Private cloud is built and operated in your own private data centers. And the reason we call it private cloud instead of just IT room is because it's using virtualized technology. And we're going to talk about virtualization in just a second. Now, there's a private cloud that's physically on your premises. There's also something I have to mention called virtual private cloud, and it's in that sort of upper left quadrant of the hosting solution. And you may hear them refer to, oh, we can provide you with a virtual private cloud. And so all they're saying there is it's dedicated resources, you're going to manage them, and it's a bit custom. And so that's a virtual private cloud that's hosted or managed by the hosting company. Now we're still talking about private cloud. We have to talk about virtualization for just a minute. It's an important concept. This is one of the key things. Virtualization is one of the key sciences that all converged all at once that have really made cloud computing even possible. Virtualization, you'll see on the left-hand side of that little picture there, this diagram of a traditional data center. You'll see this rack with 5 servers in there, 5 servers running 5 applications. That's the traditional way to do it. And so what these guys discovered was most servers in a business operation was somewhere between 5 and 9% utilized. Think about that. This is a multi-thousand-dollar computer that you're only using less than 10% of it. And so a company called VMware, they were the sort of the initiators of a lot of this stuff. They kind of reinvented an old technology, is really what they did. The ability to take one computer and time slice it up to allow multiple applications to all run at the same time. And now you wind up with something called virtualized servers, and that's what the virtualized data center on the right looks like. So instead of having 5 servers running 5 applications, you have 1 server running those same 5 applications. And it just time slices. And you may see terms like virtual server. Well, how many virtual servers? I have 1 actual server, 5 virtual servers. Or you may see the word VM or virtual machine. I have 5 VMs here. And it's all made possible by something called a hypervisor. That's the software that VMware is so famous for. Of course, there are others now. There are other companies that do hypervisors as well. But it's the piece of software that allows me now to have virtual servers all running inside of 1 physical server. You may see the word multi-tenant. And so multi-tenant basically says I've got one big instance of software running on a server, but I have multiple companies that are all using that one piece of software, and each one of them thinks that they're only person using it. And so you see here we have the ability now to share IT resources among multiple users. That's virtualization. So let's set that aside for just a minute. That's what makes private cloud possible. For instance, a company might have 100 servers and you virtualize them, and now you maybe only have 20 servers doing exactly the same thing that the 100 servers used to be. And if those servers are on-prem, you have a private cloud. Next is community cloud. This is kind of simple, but if you had multiple people, multiple companies, all who have a shared kind of reason to buy cloud resources, they get together and they sort of group buy. And this is a model that's still emerging, community cloud. I really want to talk about public cloud. These are the two important, private and public. The public cloud, you'll see, is that bottom right-hand quadrant down there from the hosting company, provided by hosting companies. It's shared infrastructure, and it's accessible primarily over the public internet. And so that's the public cloud that we've heard some about. Of course, the fourth is hybrid, and it's by far the most common implementation of cloud, where you have some mixture of on-premises, colo, and hosted. 5 essential attributes. Listen, these are the things that make the cloud what it is. And without these things, I doubt we would have what we have today as the cloud. The first thing you really need to know about cloud computing is that one of the real promises of cloud computing is this notion of on-demand self-service. Let me give you an example of this. And so in the traditional model, the older model, the boss says, we're going to buy this piece of software. We just bought it and paid for it. It's a lot of money. Now, you IT guys, go and make it work here. And so the IT department takes the software, they read the manual, study it very carefully, realize what it's going to take to run this thing. We're going to need a server like this and some more storage. We're going to need this application, this operating system, this middleware, this database. They buy all that stuff from different places. It all comes in at different times. It comes in, they start to take it out of the boxes, and they're loading the operating systems and loading the software and racking and stacking everything together. They put it all together, they load the software up, they get it configured, they go back to the boss 2 weeks later and say, okay, boss, we got it ready to go, what do you want to do? That's the traditional model. Under the new cloud model, here's how that might work. The boss says, look, we just bought the cloud version of this piece of software, make it work. And the 5 IT guys go into the back room and one of them says, look, you other 4, I got it. And he sits down at a portal, a web portal, online, for that piece of software and for the hosting company now where he's going to host it. And he clicks a few buttons and fills in a few blanks and quantifies it a little bit. We're going to need 20 of these and 10 of those. And then he gets it ready to go and he says, I'm ready to buy, and gives them a way to pay for it. And then 2 hours later, 2 hours after the boss gave him the job, he comes back and says, okay, we got it ready to go. What do I do? Now listen, that's hyperbole and it's sort of an exaggerated example. But you'll see here that explains what I call on-demand self-service. I get IT resources when I want them, without much waiting. I can do it myself. I can provision computing capabilities as needed. That's the primary key, essential attribute of cloud computing. Here's another one, is broad network access. That really means that the assumption is that everyone who needs cloud computing, and that's just about everyone, small businesses, large businesses, that anyone who needs it, first of all, has access to a very fast data connection, at least for the internet, and that it's persistent. That means that it doesn't go down much. There was a time when the internet was unreliable. It was slow and it went down a lot. And of course, in those days, cloud computing really didn't exist, and that's because of this lack of a broad network access. But today, just about everyone, in fact, it's the assumption that you can have a fast and persistent network connectivity. That's an assumption of cloud computing. Third thing, resource pooling and sharing. We talked about virtualization. Very critical here. And so one of the absolute essential attributes of cloud computing is that we can have servers and storage devices that are shared. Shared virtualization, multi-tenancy, this notion of load balancing, all of these are things that cloud computing providers do, and that's how they do it, but they make the assumption that they're going to be able to take a particular device and share it among multiple users. This is what makes cloud computing affordable for the user and profitable for the cloud hosting company. Fourth thing is rapid elasticity. It just simply means that my IT resources can stretch or contract as needed. An example might be this. You have a company who sells products from an internet site and also with a call center. They have 20 people in their call center, and that's what they do during the year. But, back to school or Christmas time, they need more people. And so they bring in, 10 new call agents and sit them down at their phone systems. And so what they do at that point, they're actually sort of able to sort of dial up their IT resources. Instead of saying now, instead of a 20-person call center, now we have 30. And they just change 20 to 30, and now it's on just like that. And they double their capacity for their website, and they get themselves through back to school for Christmas. And now in January, they say to those 10 people, thanks, see you next year. They dial it back from 30 back to 20. Dial their infrastructure and platform back to where they usually use it, and for the rest of the year. And you can change your IT resources based on your IT demand. And you only pay for what you use. Expand and scale your technology consumption at will. Of course, there's then measured service, which says you pay for what you use. You're going to pay for your IT resources, perhaps out of a different budget. You're going to pay for it as an operational expense, the way you pay your power bill or something. And it's recurring, it's predictable. And I'll go ahead and introduce here this notion of CapEx and OpEx. So capital expense, a CapEx expense, means that you pay for it all up front, right? Here's the big check, write it, I got it, I own it. OpEx means that it's an operational expense. It means that I pay for it as I need it, so to speak. It's paid for usually monthly. And sometimes you have to get a different kind of a resource. Instead of, just the CIO making a decision about buying some product, now the CFO may have to step in. And because, you're purchasing IT resources from a different budget, maybe from an operational expense budget. And so you'll see here that measured service is the promise that allows me now, that gives me a way to pay for IT resources with a different methodology. And so now companies who maybe couldn't afford that big ticket item up front have an alternative way to buy that big ticket item by paying for it over time. That's the cloud. We've learned to speak a little bit of cloud language now, and we've learned those sort of critical things that make the cloud what it is. I want to talk for a few minutes now about the cloud channel. How does the cloud work in the channel? Because it's not automatic. So first, let's just consider for a minute some basic things about what the cloud does. What the cloud does, well, so the cloud, look at these words that I've underlined. The cloud delivers technology resources to technology consumers. Now, the cloud's not technology, it's just a delivery mechanism, that's all. And so it delivers this technology, though, to the consumer. The cloud puts high-level capabilities into the hands of lower-level users. So it's famous for just leveling the playing field for the users of technology, which means that smaller companies now have resources that they could have never dreamed of before because it's delivered through the cloud. The cloud promises it's an elastic usage model, but it's an elastic usage model that expands and contracts, controlled by the actual consumer of the product. The cloud provides an OpEx expenditure model for IT departments. That's important. The cloud is designed to connect the provider, sort of the manufacturer, directly with the end user. You're starting to see here now, this thing is trouble for the channel. Amazon Web Services, perfect example. Anybody with a credit card can go to AWS, go to their website, and order up infrastructure as a service and have it now. The cloud provides a path for application providers. Okay, think about Salesforce.com, BroadSoft, some of those application providers. It provides them a means to bypass the channel, to bypass us, in order to get their product to where it needs to be. And then ultimately, you have to know that the cloud threatens the established technology channel. I know all this sounds kind of ominous, and it's meant to kind of be a little bit of a wake-up, because we have to understand that the cloud is not really meant, it was never meant to have a technology channel like me and the people that I'm talking to right now. That's what the cloud does. What does a distributor do? Okay, so we get it. A distributor gives manufacturers certain things. We give manufacturers for logistics, we get the product where it needs to be. We give them economies of scale. We buy from a lot, put it in a big warehouse. We can do things way cheaper. We give them reach into a large community of resellers that they couldn't reach otherwise. And we give them program management. We manage all their sort of gold, silver, bronze programs, and we give them product marketing. We put their product in front of lots of resellers. That's what we do for manufacturers. What a distributor does for resellers is we give them the catalog, we put everything all in one place, give them a nice catalog to buy from, we finance the deal, we give them sales and tech support, we give resellers reverse logistics, you can always send a thing back. We give them information, training, certifications, services, all the things that they need to be smarter, better at their business. And importantly, we give them multi-vendor solutions. Very few solutions are really all one vendor branded thing. And so you're going to put things together, and the distributor is the resource that helps you put those things together and helps you make sure one thing works with another that has a different brand. And so that's what distributors do. So here's what the cloud does, what distributors do. Now, what does a cloud distributor do? A cloud distributor does three things. They all begin with A. First, we aggregate. A cloud distributor will bring multiple cloud resources right into one stop shop. That's the catalog. We understand that. And that's what cloud distributors do. We aggregate a lot of resources into one place. And we buy in bulk. We buy big, and that gives us economies of scale that allows us to have the right pricing and put it all in one place. We make cloud resources available to the larger audience, which means that that's the reach part. We give cloud manufacturers reach into a large group of resellers. And then ultimately, we sell solutions, right? We sell the hardware and the software and the services and the cloud services that make up a complete solution. Because nothing's ever all cloud or all hardware. It's always a combination of things. And it almost always is multiple vendors. And so that's what we do. We aggregate these cloud resources, cloud things, and all the hardware and software that goes along with it into one place. We aggregate. The second thing we do is we automate. We automate the process, and here's why. The cloud resources are really meant to be simple, right? We talked about that. Self-serve, get it when you want it. And so if that's the perspective that companies have, that even end users have, then we have to be simple as well. If it was easy to buy it direct and hard to buy it from a distributor, you can see we don't have a role in this cloud channel. And so we have to make it simple as a distributor. So here's how we do that, is with a web portal. A cloud distributor has to have a web portal that gives resellers the ability to go directly there and self-serve. And so first they would shop. Okay, here are all the things that are available to me from this cloud distributor. And I can see them all. And these are the things that maybe they're in categories. I could choose the category that's relevant to me. Now here's my category of things, the technologies that I sell. So they can shop. Once they're there, they can learn. I don't know what this is. Click on it. It will tell me what that's about, teach me. It also helps me to compare. I see these two from two different vendors. What's the difference? How do they compare? Now I'm ready to order. This is the one I want. So I can actually order the product. I'm ready to buy it. I'm in the system. I'm logged in. It knows who I am. I have credit, so to speak. Here's how I'm going to buy it. Now I provision it. So this solution is going to have my end user that I'm going to sell this to has 20 users of this and 20 seats of that and 14 of these. I provision the product just exactly the way they want it. Then I deliver it. So I'm ready to go. And it gives me now the ability to actually access the application or the tool or whatever the service is that I bought. Now I'm able to update it. My end user says, hey, we hired 3 new people. They're going from 20 to 23. So I go back out and change 20 to 23. And now I have an expanded version of this thing. And I'm able to manage it. Moves, adds, and changes, and any management tools. I'm able to monitor their usage of the product and on and on. Do all these things, and the reseller does these things through a cloud distributor portal. The purpose of all this, also to automate, is to reduce the cost and complexity of this whole thing. We have to make it simple for resellers to be able to deliver what I call solutions as a service, right? And so it's going to include things that come from the cloud and things that come from the distributor's warehouse and things that come maybe directly from the manufacturer or from some ISV. It's going to be a combination of things, and we have to make that really reduce the cost and the complexity of that. Ultimately, too, we have to, in automating the process, we have to automate the financial piece of it as well. And so we have to be able to offer monthly billing because, listen, it's a usage model, right? And along with, if we're going to have part of this deal that's OpEx, then that OpEx piece has to be billed on an OpEx fashion to the reseller, monthly or quarterly or whatever they choose. And if there's a CapEx piece, then we're going to pay for that up front, but also Perhaps the ability to convert the CapEx piece also into OpEx using something we call hardware as a service. And you may think of that as some sort of like a leasing program. And so we have to be able to offer an entire solution, infrastructure, software, hardware, as a service, and to be able to bill appropriately. Aggregate and automate. We also, the third one is advocate. This one's important. And so, you know, if all we did was wait for the cloud to come to us, we'd wait forever. It wouldn't come to us. In fact, it's already gone around us. It's designed to go around the channel, to not use a channel. And so the cloud distributor's job, and one of our key responsibilities, is to always have our hand up saying, okay, this has to go through your channel. There has to be a channel for this. There has to be a place for us to participate here. And so our job is to always going to be to protect and promote the reseller's place in this cloud channel. Because if we as the distributor promote the reseller's place, then we make sure that ours is safe as well. So that's what cloud distributors might do. Aggregate, automate, advocate. Let's spend just a minute now as we sort of close this part out about cloud. And I want to give you 4 really absolutely clear perspectives on how this cloud channel might work. And you'll see in my picture here, there's ScanSource at the top. We're sort of play the role of the distributor, and a lot of our vendor partners in that box there, in that building. Right below us is the smart reseller. This is our reseller that we do business with as a distributor. And then there's his end user in the bottom right there. There's the cloud up there. We'll come to him in a minute. And so for right now, the first thing that cloud distributors do, is that our job is to enable resellers to deliver end user data centers. And this is what's been going on forever. The only thing that might have changed here is that now, instead of calling them end user IT departments, now we call them private clouds, okay, because we're maybe using virtualization technologies there and some of the cloud technologies. And it might be anything. It could be unified communications, it could be AIDC at POS, it could be video surveillance, it could be almost any kind of an application. And you'll see here in the animation here, the product comes from the distributor through the reseller, they install it at the end user site, and the end user gets one nice fat paycheck in the process. And listen, this has been going on forever. This is the way the IT channel has worked forever, and we just merge a little bit of cloud discussion into that thing with virtualization and other things, and that's what we're still doing that. We'll always do that. That's what a cloud distributor does. Also, a cloud distributor's job is to enable resellers in developing in-house data centers, in-house to the reseller. Now, the smart reseller starts to look out and say, all right, I've been installing these things on-prem now for a long time. Wouldn't it make sense, I wonder, for me to install it here and sell it to the end user as a service? And that helps me now develop into this cloud environment. And that's a good idea. Smart resellers are all thinking in terms of that. They're thinking in terms of hosting their own UC platforms, their own AIDC applications. Maybe it's the ones that they've written, their own applications, and they're hosting them themselves. Hosted video surveillance, whatever it might be. And so along comes with it the servers and storage, all the infrastructure that's there, but now they want to do it in-house, and our job is to help them do that. So the first thing we do as a distributor is help the reseller make a data connection between them and the end user, and that comes from carrier services that are all part of this cloud distribution model. Once the connection is made, then the reseller promotes his data center, and now instead of installing the equipment at the end user site, he installs it in his own facility. And now you think, well, okay, is that really smart? Yes, it is, because it gives him the ability now to manage that very closely and to develop a monthly recurring revenue model between him and this end user. And the end user pays as a service for the things that now this reseller is hosting. The reseller paid CapEx to the distributor. It is selling the product OpEx to the end user. And as such, he's now able to add a new layer of things, these new layer of managed services. Because it's much closer to him, he can do mobile device management and wireless network management, communications as a service. He can manage those as a service, as an ongoing service offering that he adds to now the as a service technology that he's providing. So we're helping them with their in-house data centers. Here's a third option. We want to also help them now scale their data center. And so you see now part of the distributor's relationship here is that we don't just own the vendors, but we also own cloud resources as well. So we have a relationship with cloud provider up there. And in this case, it's a colo. And so we give the reseller now access to co-location facilities so that as he puts one unit in and puts another unit in and puts another, and he's out of space, or maybe his building is not accommodating. A lot of these it's not fit for a big data center. So how does he scale that operation? Instead of putting it in his building, he puts it in the co-location facility. Runs just as well from there. It's connected to the end user. He manages it just like he always did. He gives them those same managed services as he did before, but now because it's at a colo, yes, maybe some new options. Things like disaster recovery and backup services and other kinds of services that now he can wholesale from that co-location facility. He wholesales to the end user the actual placement of the product in the co-location facility, as well as some services that colo might also add to the mix, along with the product as he provides it. And now again, all he's doing now is he's increasing that monthly recurring revenue factor back from his end user. Last option. We want to help resellers deliver complete cloud solutions. And so now as part of our cloud hosting provider, as a vendor through our distribution channel, we have access to co-location facilities. It might be multiples of those. They might be regional. But also we have access to their data centers as well. Big data centers who can provide those infrastructure, platform, software as a service kinds of offerings that you can only get from big data centers. And you might be able to get now from your ScanSource distributor, from the cloud distributor, ScanSource hosted IP Office as an example. A complete hosted solution that the reseller is able to acquire as a hosted service through their distributor that they provide ultimately out to the end user. They manage it. Again, these are just IT resources that are sitting someplace else. They manage it and provide that solution just like they always did. It could be AIDC applications, could be video surveillance, almost anything along with it comes the managed services, the disaster recovery backup that they did. Also now they can sell to this end user additional infrastructure, hosted email, all sorts of other applications that they can offer now because they have this relationship through their cloud distributor of this hosting company. And then also some of the other vendors may have their own hosted solution. And so like ShoreTel Sky, Polycom, Motorola, these others have the other vendors have hosted solutions that they host. And so now when this reseller, this smart reseller comes to the cloud distributor portal, he's able to see all of these options that come more directly through the distributor or through other manufacturers. And again, our job is to aggregate all of those resources into one place, make them crazy simple and automated to provide. And the big news there is that monthly recurring revenue stream continues to grow and grow and grow over time. It's a very healthy business model for resellers who really have the courage and the know-how and the ability to embrace this cloud model. And a cloud distributor's job is to help resellers do just that. What should I know? I should know some things about the cloud landscape. Use on-prem and colo in a sentence. Some things about these hosted terms, these three questions we have to answer, choices we have to make. You should know a little bit about these three service models. They're pretty straightforward. These deployment models, what you should know there is really private cloud, public cloud, and that normally we'll have a combination of the two. You should have some grip of these 5 essential attributes. You have some idea. Just see them in a basic list there and to be able to understand the role that they play, to be able to have a conversation with your customer about CapEx versus OpEx. That's important. And then ultimately, you have to understand this cloud channel that we're all involved in and know what cloud distributors do, but also know what cloud resellers do. And to be able to aggregate and automate and be the advocate for this cloud technology through our channel. Also today we've learned about convergence. We've learned there's one really big network, and that network is a connection of all IP networks. We've learned some things about the OSI model. We've learned to speak cloud and what the cloud does and how the cloud channel works. Now, all of that in preparation to build a network. And that's what we're going to do next. We're going to build a network for this small company, and understanding how to build that network, it's vital that we have these concepts that we've already learned about this big network, about how it all works. So We're going to have some fun as we learn to build this network. Thanks.